Blessed to be part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO, KIDOTalkRadio.com. Joined now by the pride of Lowell, Massachusetts, author of the new book, Trump's Enemies. And before he was at the White House, he was a guest at the Miller House in Merrimack, New Hampshire. Corey Lewandowski. Mr. Lewandowski, thank you for joining us.
Kevin, thank you. How are you?
You know something? My mom and dad are so proud of you. We talk about you all the time. We talk about you on this program, and congratulations, sir.
Well, thank you. You know, I've known your parents for a long time, and thank you to Larry for his service to our country and all the years he put into the military to keep us safe. So thank you.
You know, Corey, I have to ask you, you have been at the forefront with Mr. Trump for quite some time. Another bestseller out, Trump's Enemies. You're on all the shows. But people don't know a lot about you. You're a family man. You love New Hampshire. You love America. You're living the American dream. What was that like for you, sir, when you first got the call from Mr. Trump?
Well, look, I'm a very average guy, I like to say, who went on an amazing journey. You know, I grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, and not a town with a lot of privilege. Didn't go to the best schools, but found a way to work hard and get a phone call to go and meet then Mr. Trump. And the day I met him, basically, the second time I ever met him, the first time in New York, he offered me a job to come work for him. I thought the job would last about 90 days, and here we are about 5 years later, and I'm still around the Trump orbit, and I think we've helped to change the direction of the country for the better. So it's been a pretty amazing ride for a very average guy.
But you represent all of us, Corey, when you are there with Mr. Trump. Does he really get America? Obviously, we do. We voted for him, but you know him personally. Your thoughts?
You know, I'll tell you what, this is a man, and the first time I sat with him to talk about a potential campaign for president, I said, why would you want to do this? You're already rich, you've got a great family, you've got a great life. And he said, you know, Corey, it's not for me, and it's not for my sons and daughters, it's for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, because if we don't do something, we're going off a cliff here in this country. And, you know, I thought about that, and it harkens back to the days of our founding fathers who literally put their fortunes on the line to make decisions that were going to change the direction of our country. And Donald Trump has done that, and it would have been much, much easier for him to just sit by and enjoy his nice life in New York or in Florida. But he got into the arena, and now he's fighting every day in Washington for the things that I think are important, which are bringing back American values, being able to say Merry Christmas again, renegotiating our bad trade deals, putting Americans back to work. And that's what our country is about. And most importantly, by being an unapologetic, proud American, where we take second place to no one because we're the greatest country in the world.
Corey Lewandowski joining us, author of Trump's Enemies, How the Deep State is Undermining the Presidency. Corey, as someone who has served the nation, has been in law enforcement, you saw the values going away under 8 years of Obama, that conservative, Republican, Christian Americans were afraid to say Merry Christmas, and politicians, really Republicans, before President Trump, just kind of shied away, shuffling into a closet.
You're exactly right, because political correctness has run amok. You know, that if you remember during the campaign, he said, I'm going to make it okay to say Merry Christmas again. Can you imagine? And look, Kevin, you've heard the conversations in the last week of Christmas songs that we have to ban because they're no longer politically correct. The Christmas movies like Rudolph and Frosty the Snowman, you can't call him a snowman anymore. He's Frosty the Snow Person. This is insanity, right? I mean, look, we can't allow the liberals to indoctrinate us on things that are just complete nonsense. It's okay to call somebody a snowman. It's not going to offend the snow women out there if they even exist. It's so crazy. And the thing that I think the Americans like about Donald Trump, whether you agree with his policies or you disagree, he stands up and he fights for what he believes in, and Americans love a fighter.
And speaking of a fighter, Corey, you're a fighter. What was it like for you being out there on that select elite team, beating the unbeatable and doing the unthinkable? I mean, all of a sudden, you know, you're talking to the New Hampshire press, and they're good guys. Jack Heath's a great guy, but all of a sudden you're on with Sean Hannity, you're on the Today Show, you're everywhere representing Mr. Trump.
Well, it's a very humbling thing, and I never take it for granted. What I tried to do then and what I try and do now is go out and tell people the truth. And you can disagree with me on issues, but I think most people understand that when I say something, I believe in what I say, and I stand for what I believe in. And I think that's an important value And so going out on the Today Show or Good Morning America or any of those nationally syndicated shows, look, I respect the individuals who are asking me the question, but I also expect intellectual integrity and intellectual honesty. And what we've seen, unfortunately, Kevin, as you know, is too many reporters now claim to be reporters, unbiased journalists, want to be the story and not report the story. We've seen it with Jim Acosta. We've seen it with so many fake news stories that the American people are waking up and saying, that's not what we signed up for. If we want commentary, we'll go get commentary. But if we just want the news, they're turning away from the standard outlets and they're going to other places to get that news because it's been so biased against this president.
Trump's enemies, how the deep state is undermining the president. Corey Lewandowski joining us on KIDO Talk Radio. What's it like for your friends that are still within the White House, Sarah Huckabee Sanders and others, harassed? Corey, one thing I know about you is that if anybody came up on the street and tried to harass you, that would not be good for them. But, I mean, you have people, the Secretary of Homeland Security being harassed at restaurants. What's it like within the White House bubble?
Well, I'll tell you, I was with the president right after the day that Kirstjen Nielsen, the Secretary of Homeland Security, was harassed in that restaurant. He and I were flying out, more appropriately, I was flying with him on Air Force One out to Las Vegas to do an event that day. And you know what? He's just so shocked and so appalled by it because the left is perpetuating that. If you see them, kick them when they're down, go harass these people. I don't ever remember, Kevin, never once in my life, Republicans or conservatives doing that to people of the Obama administration, and it's uncalled for. And look, the difference with me is I'm a private citizen, man. I know how to handle myself, and I don't think people understand the difference between being a private citizen and a government employee and what that looks like, or my ability to make sure that the situation I'm in, I'm going to be protected regardless of who comes over to me. But I feel terrible for the people who are just trying to do their job in government service, and they're being harassed by people who want to be nameless, faceless individuals and hide behind masks and cower behind Antifa to go and attack people shamelessly, and that has to stop because someone's going to get hurt.
Corey, what do you say to the liberals that are repulsed by President Trump's, once again, championing American values, as you noted, saying Merry Christmas, which most people have been, shunted to the side. I mean, we used to say that all the time as kids.
Well, of course we did. And look, what's wrong with putting Christ into Christmas? That's what this is about. We are a nation. We are a world that, has had religion in it from its inception. And many wars have been fought over religion. So to think that we can't have the words Christmas displayed on government property, or that we've got to have, courts weigh in whether you can produce the Ten Commandments anymore, is so foreign to me. Everybody wants to live in this world of political correctness, except when the liberals decide they're deciding what's politically correct. And there will come a time where all of the values that we have fought for as a nation, one nation under God, right on our money, every day, they're going to want to have that removed. When they say your children don't have to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in the classrooms anymore like my kids do every day when they go to the Wyndham Public Schools, right? It's crazy how left things are going, but they have such a big microphone, and they shame people into feeling bad for saying things that they believe in, and the left is very, very good at shaming people out of their beliefs and making you go underground and not say the things that you want to, like Merry Christmas.
Corey Lewandowski joining us, Trump's Enemies, his new bestseller, How the Deep State is Undermining the Presidency, on KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller. Corey, let's take a look at the transition when you had all these folks coming in from various grassroots and establishment locations. You were there with Mr. Trump from the very beginning, and I'm sure you covered in your book both Republicans and Democrats, the president's enemies. How did that transition mix into the first couple years of the administration?
Well, look, the transition really put us behind, because what we saw coming in from the transition were people like Gary Cohn and Rob Porter and Sean Spicer and H.R. McMaster and Rex Tillerson and Joe Hagan, these guys who didn't support the president during the campaign, likely didn't vote for him on Election Day, but burrowed their way into the administration, into some very senior positions, only to stop the president's agenda from going forward. And in Bob Woodward's book, he talks about the fact that Gary Cohn and Rob Porter were literally removing documents from the president's desk that he was trying to sign to renegotiate a trade deal with South Korea, and they didn't like the deal, so they decided that they were going to stop the deal from going forward. That is a disservice to the president and, more importantly, the American people. So the good news is, in the last few months, we've seen some of those changes happen. Gary Cohn is gone, and we brought in Larry Kudlow. H.R. McMaster is gone, and we've brought in John Bolton, who I think is a phenomenal addition. We've gotten rid of the former Secretary of State, and we've put in Mike Pompeo, someone who is with the president on his foreign policy agenda. And, Kevin, I'm not saying that you have to have everybody who agrees with Trump in every meeting, but the difference is once the president makes the final decision of which direction we're going to take a policy matter, everybody in that team has to get on that team and move in the same direction. And for the first year and a half, we didn't have that. And there are still people inside the White House today who think it is their job to protect the American people from this president, and those people need to go.
Corey Lewandowski joining us. Trump's Enemies, How the Deep State is Undermining the President. It's available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com. Corey, back to you for a moment. Again, I've known you. My brother, Matt, still talks about you and pounding signs for Bob Smith. It made such an impression on his life. And what I've reminded people here is that you have a family, you have dreams. And could you share with us the sacrifice of being on the road with the president? Sure, you're on the shows, but you'd rather be home in New Hampshire with your family.
Well, you're exactly right. And, your brother has young kids. I know them well. Look, when I joined the Donald Trump organization, my 4 kids were ages 7, 5, and 3. And basically, I disappeared for 2 years. And that's because I spent my time on the road traveling. There was one period of time where I spent 73 days straight on the road, not coming home, not being here. And I know I was doing my best for a service for the country, and that was my commitment. But it's obviously difficult to miss those birthdays, to miss those celebrations, to miss all those things. And looking back on it, right, I'm very grateful and humbled that I had the opportunity to do it. But I also know how many things I missed and how difficult that was for my family, because you don't get that time back. And I know people all make sacrifices in their day-to-day lives for things, but I'll tell you, I'm happy I'm not in the White House. I've got a great job. I get to write books for a living. I get to talk about Trump's enemies. I get to come on the radio with you, Kevin. And more importantly, yesterday and today I've been having the opportunity to be home in New Hampshire.
Corey, what was it like, though, to be vilified all the time? And again, I've known you, and we're in Idaho, but I go, look, they've got it wrong about this guy. And I know you're a tough guy. You handled that.
Well, look, it never really bothers me. Like, I've got pretty broad shoulders. I really do.
You do.
And I can take it. The people that it bothers the most are the ones around you that care about you, because they have to listen to it. They have to go out and see their friends and hear it from, people in town and all those other things. And it's a really hard thing for me. Look, there's not a lot of people who come up and chastise me to my face or say things to me, because I'm really not that kind of guy that would allow that. The harder part is when your kids have to go to school, or your family has to be out in the town, or the attacks on social media, Facebook, whatever that may be. Those are the hardest things, because it's almost impossible to fight back. And while I say to ignore it, it's obviously difficult for family members who know you and know what it really is about. But look, the way the left attacked me because of my support for Donald Trump is almost unprecedented. And I just take you back to the press conference just a couple of weeks ago with Jim Acosta, right? That was a story that lasted about 3 days. My story, which was not even similar to Jim Acosta's, lasted weeks and weeks and weeks. And, they rewound every tenth of a second of a video like it's a Zapruder film.
Right.
And, they did everything they could to chastise me, to call me a bad person, without ever contacting me, because I didn't fit their liberal narrative. But when you're one of them, when you're one of the elites, the special people, you can get away with things that nobody else can. And we've seen that time and time again in the media, when left-wing liberals have called Trump supporters Nazis and racist and xenophobic, and there's been no recourse whatsoever. But if a conservative would have done that to a Democrat, they would have been fired immediately, and that would have been their accountability.
Our great friend Corey Lewandowski joining us. Trump's Enemies, How the Deep State is Undermining the Presidency. Is that how the president copes with the criticism against his family?
Well, look, look, it's got to be very difficult for him. Thank God he is so tough. And, I have the privilege of speaking to him on a very, very regular basis, and he wakes up every day looking to fight. And in my book, Trump's Enemies, I interview the president. It's the only interview he has done in the first 2 years for a book. And I ask him these questions. What's it like? And he said, Corey, it's so different than anybody would ever know what it's like to be the president. And it's so much bigger and more important than anything he had ever done. And so all the sacrifices that he is making, all the attacks on his family, our great first lady, the entire first family. Look, if she was a Democrat, they would be praising her and she'd be on the cover of every magazine across the country. But when she raised an issue about a staffer in the White House who she didn't think deserved the privilege of working there anymore, all of a sudden she was a person who should be seen from and not heard from. And that is such a hypocrisy when you think about the way they treated Hillary Clinton when she was the first lady and the role she had in formulating public policy.
Well, and that's such a relevant point. Trump's enemies. Corey, getting back to what your research in the book, it seemed that quite a bit of turnover in the White House. We know you're a President Trump guy. You're a loyal guy. You go back to just the again, whether it was Bannon, whether it was Manafort, whether it was all these people, it seemed that everybody had competing interests instead of the interest of the country and the interest of the administration.
You're exactly right, and that is what has really hampered more success in the first 2 years. If people would have put their personal biases aside, their personal desires to be successful, this president could have achieved even more than he did in the first 2 years. And, Kevin, he's got some historic accomplishments. 2 Supreme Court justices, numerous 84 appellate court justices that are on there. You've got the deregulation of our environmental regulations, our government regulations, which have hampered growth. You've seen significant job growth, 4.5 million new jobs, the lowest unemployment for African Americans and Hispanic Americans ever recorded. And just think if he had a team from day one that went in there that he has the right to have. Look, I look back at what Barack Obama had. He had Valerie Jarrett. He had Rahm Emanuel. He had David Axelrod. He had these guys who, regardless of anything else, they were loyal to the president and they were making sure his agenda was going forward. We ended up with people in the building who should have never been there, and we're still recovering from it today.
Corey, any final thoughts? I sure appreciate the shout-outs to my family. They are so proud of you. We talk about you all the time, Corey.
Well, look, my final thought is this. If you read the book and you look and see what the intelligence community did, and I'm talking about Comey and Clapper and Brennan and the senior members of law enforcement, we have to be resolved in making sure nothing like that ever happens again. They use their badges that they had from the FBI and other senior law enforcement agencies, and they spied on Americans because they didn't agree with them politically. It's a very scary thing, and we must as a country do better and make sure it never happens again. I detail the whole thing in Trump's Enemies.
Corey, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right, Corey Lewandowski joining us. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And if you missed any part of that interview, that exclusive interview with Corey Lewandowski, you can check that out after 10 o'clock today on KIDO Talk Radio, the home of all the podcasts throughout our time together. You can catch any show at KIDOTalkRadio.com. Also, the YouTube channel where you can check out the video of the 90th year celebration. KIDO, Idaho's first radio station, celebrating that last week. That is available on our YouTube channel, KIDOTalkRadio.com. Kevin Miller on 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Let's find out what's happening in your world. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning, Kevin.
Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. Looking over some of the local headlines. Suez looking to buy Eagle Water. Don't they own just all the water company here in the Treasure Valley as well, the Suez Company? We'll take a look at that, and this is a tough one. And someone maybe can explain this to me. We're talking about Idaho's largest private employer will cut 100 jobs as part of a statewide system overhaul. Now, St. Luke's Health System has more than 14,000 employees from the statesman here, Eastern Oregon to the Magic Valley. Audrey Dutton writing this piece. So they're cutting 100 jobs, less than 1% of those jobs being cut, unless you're in that 1%. Many of those cuts have already happened, according to the St. Luke's officials. This is not an effort to say we want to reduce X amount of our workforce or cut X amount of cost, according to the St. Luke's people. Now, as my dad will tell you, I am not a bright man, and I'm not fishing for compliments here on KIDO Talk Radio. But if you can build all these wonderful big buildings, as we see in downtown Boise, as we see in Meridian, as we see in Nampa, as we see everywhere, how in the world can you cut 100 jobs? Now, a lot of people will think, well, 100 jobs, but 100 jobs in healthcare? That's the fastest growing job section in the world, in the country, right? 100 jobs being cut. And yet you have the profitability of every hospital going up. I mean, my favorite thing to do when I go to the hospital is to hear what they say when all of a sudden I'm just like, I thought I said something and I didn't. It was just kind of a strange moment there where they say, what's your copay? Not, are you hurt? What's your copay? So, coming up, we'll take a look at 100 jobs being cut locally at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Joining us now, John Decker. That was my poor attempt at stalling from your house to the White House exclusively on KIDO Talk Radio. Mr. Decker joins us live once again. John, how are you?
Hey, I'm great, Kevin. How are you doing today? Hope you had my first day back at the White House after being down in Buenos Aires, and it's a long trip back, but it's good to be back at the White House, and a lot happening this week with the funeral of President George H.W. Bush.
John Decker, as a life committed to covering government politics, reporting, your thoughts on the Washington reaction to the death of the 41st president?
Well, I think it's an appropriate reaction. I was a big fan of George H.W. Bush, and I'll tell you a story. My most prized possession is a photograph of President Ronald Reagan, Vice President George H.W. Bush, and Soviet Union President Mikhail Gorbachev. They're all waving at the camera, smiling, and the Statue of Liberty is in the background. It's a pretty famous photograph. You may have seen it before. Well, I got it autographed by all three of them. And so I can tell you when I showed it to President George H.W. Bush, he wasn't president at the time, he beamed when I showed him that photograph, and he was talking to me about what that day was like, what that meant to him, what it meant to our country. Of course, he signed the photograph, and we took a photograph together after he signed it. But that, to me, every time I see that photo that's hanging in my office, it's one of those things that brings a smile to my face, because I thought he was a great president, a great steward for our country, particularly during the end of the Cold War. And I don't think there's another president who could have managed the first Persian Gulf War any better than President George H.W. Bush.
Indeed, when you take a look at what he did, and yet you have some people that are, that are calling into this program a little angry with him and such. But President Bush, and John Decker, please correct me, to describe him as a life well lived. I mean, personally, with his family, politically, he did just about everything.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable when you read through his resume, all of the things that he did in terms of service to our country from the time that he was 18 years old, signing up after Pearl Harbor to join the U.S. Navy, and at the time the youngest fighter pilot in the U.S. Navy. And from there, what a life of public service as a congressman, as the U.S. envoy to China, as the CIA director, as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, as vice president, and of course as president. Really, as you put it, Kevin, a life well lived, and really the embodiment of what it means to serve your country. That was something that was ingrained in him from an early age by his parents, and he in turn has ingrained that spirit and that belief in his own family. His son, of course, becoming president, his other son, Jed, becoming governor of Florida, and it's carried on by future generations as well. You have, of course, George P. Bush, who's the land commissioner in Texas. So it's going to be a great I think, tribute to the 41st president tomorrow at the National Cathedral. I'm fortunate in the sense that I'll be traveling with the president to the funeral at the National Cathedral tomorrow, and so I can, pay my respects to a person who I thought was a great president for our country.
John, when you describe the scene in the rotunda, and many people in Idaho, unfortunately, haven't had a chance to go there. I covered President Reagan's funeral from there, or his memorial service, and you have the images of all the great American presidents and heroes literally staring down at the coffin of President Bush. Can you take us there at all?
Well, I mean, I don't think any country does these types of events better than the United States in terms of tributes to our former leaders. This is a state funeral. And, if any of your listeners, and I'm sure they will, tune in to watch the events as they take place on television, it's well worth it. It doesn't happen that often. As you mentioned, the last time it happened was with President Ronald Reagan. And, I thought that was a beautiful service. It was remarkable the way the Reagan family planned for that, and having the funeral ultimately taking place out in Simi Valley at the Reagan Library at sunset. I mean, boy, it was like run like a military service in the sense that everything was done so precision-like. And the same thing will be true for President George H.W. Bush, with the events that will take place here tomorrow at the National Cathedral and the events that will take place at the president's own presidential library at Texas A&M University.
John Decker, we always appreciate you. You have a great day, sir.
You too, Kevin. Have a great day. Thank you.
All right, John Decker joining us. Liberty Linda joins us now on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. Wow, what a wonderful interview you had with Corey Lewandowski. I remember after President Trump won, you letting us know about your good friend Corey Lewandowski, and you know that he was a good friend to you and your family. Then he became very special to me, too.
Well, thank you for that. As you could tell, he doesn't take a lot of guff. He's a typical New Englander from east of the Great River. Those people, they're a very unique breed.
He's a great guy, and I've always listened, tried to see him and things like that through the years, and so thankful that you shared all that with us and shared your friendship with him. And thank you for having me on today. We honor you, Kevin.
Well, I appreciate that, Liberty Linda. I have to say this about Corey Lewandowski is that Lowell, Massachusetts is a very rough place, and he is the living embodiment that you can achieve just about anything in America, because it's very equivalent to what you would see in some of the more tougher places in California and Los Angeles or what have you. And that kid, nothing was given to him, and the fact that he's so close with the president shows you that the American dream is alive and well.
Absolutely. And it's about our president as well. He can reach out to anyone. And I love the way he does that. He just cares for people. He doesn't care about the name behind them or the prestigiousness about them. He likes the person themselves. And that's just another thing I like about our president. Anyway, I just have to say that Tom Munz is correct about 41. He was New World Order, but Kevin, for myself, when a person passes away, that's the time we think of the nice things about a person. Then after the funeral, it's different. So President Bush was a good family man. He was a kind man. He was very nice to everyone. Was said about him that he would wave to the people that didn't seem to be in the higher echelons of the government. He was kind to everyone. Those things I say are very nice about President Bush 41. I know he did those things, and he had this great kindness for others. And then I can't believe our in-house historian, Hank, was wrong this morning.
Well, by the way, for people that missed it, Hank took Tom Munns to task and maybe you to task for being in with George Soros.
Well, it's just the opposite. George Soros believes the absolute opposite that we do and the John Birch Society. So, Hank needs to review his notes, and he'll find out George Soros is on the other side. So, anyway, so our house historian, we have to put, one mark against him. I have to talk to Hank about that.
Well, we appreciate that, Liberty Linda, and thank you for your patience this morning.
Well, we love you so much, and it's wonderful listening to your show. I can't say anything more about that.
Well, we appreciate it, and like we said, if you missed the Corey Lewandowski interview, our podcast will be up after 10 a.m. today. Thank you.
Oh, I did. It was wonderful.
Well, we appreciate that. Take care of yourself. Thank you, Liberty Linda.
You too, Kevin. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Let's get Jim from Middleton in. We missed him in the last hour. We'll get him in this hour. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Kevin. Thanks for taking my call. Hope you're doing well.
You know what I always say, still employed, Jim, so that's doing well, and my creditors seem to appreciate that, and you?
Just right, Kevin. Overall, no complaints, aside from some of the political climate. But I want to chime in regards to the Bush thing. I think some things are getting out of context, okay? In regards to President Bush, he was a good man, good family man, what have you, served his country in the military, and no one's taken that away from him. I think, and I'm not speaking for everyone, Kevin, I think what the main thrust is in regards to Bush and others like him are the betrayal that the Republicans have campaigned on and what they've actually done. And another thing about Bush is not so much read my lips lie, okay? Because, we see a lot of lying from our politicians. But it was the underlying things behind the curtain that we're starting to see that's coming, that we're seeing unfolding. And I think that's the main thrust here. A lot of these establishment Republicans are, in fact, globalist people. And they don't fight for what they really believe in. They tell us what we want to hear, and they don't come across the finish line taking care of business. And I think that is the big, big thing. You can look at Bush and with a few niceties and what have you, but you go behind the curtain and see actually what was being done, the deals that were being made and so forth, the globalist and the New World Order. That is the big deal. The only two presidents that I've ever seen that really fought for their principles and what they believed in and what they campaigned on is Reagan and Trump. I just wanted to share that, and it's not I hate Bush. We've been lied to by the Republican Party for years, Kevin. Tell me that I'm wrong there.
You're not. You're not wrong, but to me, I think in the end, when President Bush, Jim, was talking about a new world order, he was talking about a post-communism world. And to put it in context of the deep state today, I don't know if that does it justice back to what Tom was saying. And, the idea that here you have this man that did this, this, and this. And look, we can go back to John McCain, who's a very polarizing figure, but John McCain was tortured. John McCain did a lot. And I think sometimes when people die, and it's very rare on this occasion, that you put those aside. When people say that Bush was bad, look, the wall came down and there were no shots fired. And yes, that President Reagan was responsible for it, but it happened under President Bush's time. President Bush gave us Bill Clinton, which gave us the Republican Congress, which eventually gave us George Bush, then Barack Obama. Who would have known that if he would have won re-election? And it was always strange. On one hand, he'd have these 1,000 points of light. On the other hand, he never got the quote-unquote vision thing. So I think when you have a leader, now it'll be interesting how we feel about Bill Clinton when he goes, and not to be flippant about it, whether or not we'll remember him as we're remembering other presidents.
Well, you have a small point there. I'll give you that. But there again, look at the whole picture, Kevin. Look at what all of the politicians, our major politicians, have talked about and campaigned on. Look at Clinton, look at Bush the younger. Look at what they've all campaigned on and promised, and look where we are now. Okay, the country's poor, taxes are higher, deficits higher, and they're all wealthier. I look at it as I look at gauges. I don't get personal about this. And that's what I look at, okay? Remember a few years ago, I told you, Ivoxeros, Pios Anthropos Isi, Pos Parapatai. Greek translation, American translation, I know the kind of person you are by the way you walk. I look at, Kevin, the impact and the results. Quickly, I'll leave you with this. You came here 9 years ago. You're not a politician. You came here, a humble bumble. You came into this radio station. Look what you have done. You're not a politician. You're not in the elite. You came here and you made an impact. You made a difference, Kevin, because you worked hard. You believed in what you're doing. And that's how I judge people. And when I see these politicians talking but not doing the walk, Kevin, I'm not going to give them praises where they're undeserved. Anyway, thanks for letting me chime in there, Kevin, and you have a great day.
Thank you, Jim. Take care. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Does Jim have a point? 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. And Merry Christmas. Hope you're having a good one. Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone number is 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up next hour, we're going to take a look at a holiday classic. We talked a little bit about this before. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer should be banned, the libs are saying, because it's about bullying. And by the way, I do love that Corey Lewandowski says that you can't say snowmen anymore. There's no Frosty. Oh, my goodness, I just had a thought. There's no Frosty the Snowman because there's not a snow woman. Well, what if Frosty wanted to be a woman? Would we have a transgendered thing? You know, regardless of what we think about these ever-sensitive issues, and we are sensitive to those, you know, can't we just have fun? Can't we just enjoy the holidays? Can't we just enjoy Christmas? We all take ourselves so seriously. And, you know, here we have it. And by the way, Jim, thank you for the nice comments about getting things done. And we get things done because we provide we're the conduit to you. And I think those politicians that get it, like President Trump, understand it. Those that don't, well, they have their own issues. So at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, you go back to President Bush, and yes, read my lips, no new taxes. That was bad. That was horrific. That was the end of him. And what President Bush did was something that President Trump has learned. Coming up next, the mistake that cost President Bush a re-election. And it's what the media wants President Trump to do. But first, you're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio.
7's Eric Gibbert.
You know, the media keeps talking about President Bush, but President Bush was schnookered. He was schnookered by the devious, mischievous libs. And coming up, I'm going to tell you what President Bush did that the media would love President Trump to do. But I don't think he's buying it. That more after Fox News, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio.